Good morning on day 8. It's going to be an interesting day. And yeah, the cathedral's closed again. This is Bangor. It's a university city, and you can see quite a lot of these bigger buildings, the university buildings, with the odd supermarket mixed in. There's a 50% chance of rain today, so I'm leaving the coat off while it's dry. Anyway, it's a walk from Bangor to Llanberis today, and that'll take me over some quite high ground, but also along some trails, old railway lines, woodland, kind of those kind of field type trails, but also through some kind of small villages which have a lot of history for Wales, particularly in the slate industry. And then a nice walk through the trees down into Llanberis. The trail out of Bangor is quite a steep climb. It's heading towards Minford, but soon you reach the top and then it's just down. It's just a faster way than it was before. We kind of went round Bangor Mountain. A little bit zoomed in, but that's the direction I'm heading, over towards that forest over there, up there, and kind of up that line to those trees up on the ridge there. A steep descent brings you down to Bangor Ford. These are quite rare round here, but this one's flowing quite nicely. We're about to join a trail that we joined on day 7, but we're about 500 metres from before and going in completely the opposite direction. I can hear the A55 again. So what you find with this route is to go into Bangor to see the cathedral. You kind of do a very big loop. You kind of start it on day 7, and day 8 you kind of complete it. Probably only about a mile away from where I turned down to go towards Bangor. I think it's because the original route was planned to go through Carnarvon, which would take you along a different way out of Bangor, but that takes you across a lot more roads. So this one takes you along the foothills of Snowdonia, but it just means you've got this loop in the beginning. And I'm about to kind of pass under the A55 now. After a third crossing of the A55, it's back onto the old railway line. This takes you to an old bridge with an interesting creation on it. So that's where the old railway bridge used to cross, and we now have a new footbridge. The line continues up to Tregarth, but after a kilometre, eeny meeny miny mo, but I just caught sight of a pilgrim sign, so left it is, and on and across. Leaving the railway line behind, the trail now zigzags its way across a series of tracks, trails and fields as we're heading up towards some woodland. The paths are well marked and quite easy going in this section. They have dangerous written all over them. So that's the kind of way ahead, up into those trees. That's kind of direction of Bangor. The woodland was an interesting change to this walk, and the trees provided some great shelter as it was actually raining outside the woods. Emerging from the woodland, you get a view of Carnarvon. The trail now starts to climb, and this awards you with a view of the whole of Anglesey. This starts by looking towards Carnarvon and Newborough, and then swings all the way across the island until you get to Bangor and Beaumaris at the other end. You pass this mini communications tower as you start the next stage of the walk. Now this is going to be across much more open country with larger views. Essentially this starts by crossing a series of fields. It's just started raining, kind of the worst bit really, because it's now the kind of steeper part of the climb over the top here, so I might try and find somewhere up ahead. I can see a big group of trees. I might try and find somewhere up there to sit and have lunch and just kind of shelter for a while and see if it passes over. So hopefully a few minutes of respite and a little tiny bit of shelter, we'll see. After a very short stop, it's a climb up over the moorland and you get your first view of all of the mountains. There's Llyn and Snowdon hiding over there in the clouds. But you also get a view of the only village on today's walk, which is Deiniolen. There's a descent down to a road, and then another descent down into the village where you get a view of the path ahead. The village itself is part of the Welsh slate community, and an awful lot of miners would have lived here. The trail now heads out of the village and up. It's a good climb up to the road, and there's a last chance to look back at that recent bit of the trail. That is Llanberis, which is the kind of final destination. I'll kind of head down through these woods round the lake and come back down into Llanberis. No view of the summit of Snowdon either. The rain had returned, but it didn't actually spoil the view down into Llanberis. This was the last section of the walk, a descent, which was going to be quite interesting. Private road, public footpath. Get a view of the quarries on the other side of Llanberis. Look a little bit peaceful now. Obviously there were quarries for quarrying slate, but little known is that in World War II there was a major underground munitions store there. The trail now moves down into the Aberdaron Country Park, which is a hillside with a large amount of woodland over it. Like I say, a little labyrinth of paths here. There were no Pilgrims Way markings, but the trail seemed to flow okay, and I followed it all the way along to a series of quarry buildings and inclines. Llanberis, nearly there. A very steep set of steps down. There's a series of levels and more steps that lead you all the way down to Vivian Quarry. I know the quarry very well because I've climbed many of its faces, but I've also dived to the bottom of its lake, which is 19 metres deep. Another incline heading up to the other part of the quarry. There's also a building that overlooks the main visitor area. It's now a short walk down the road and across a bridge, where there's a great view of Aberdaron Castle sitting on the promontory. Now don't follow the road, you need to turn right. You get a look back at the woods and the inclines and Vivian Quarry, but you're now close to the end. Llanberis is in sight. Made it to Llanberis, and Joe Brown's here is supposedly where there's a pilgrim stamp. The lake is a great place to finish. It has its own Excalibur sword and some fantastic views up the Llanberis Pass. Well, that's it for day 8. Made it to Llanberis, edge of Snowdonia, and it's actually stopped raining, which is really good. Terrain today has been very varied, paths different to, moorland, lovely made tarmac paths, cycle tracks. It's been a very mixed run today. Some fantastic views despite the weather, but all in all, yes, very good stage. That's it for today, apart from one thing, a nice cup of coffee.